Hello, Beatriz. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us today. How's everything going on your side?
Hi, Rafa. Good morning from Santiago de Chile. Everything going perfectly well. How about you?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. For everyone watching, we have Beatriz Karstens. She is participating from Chile, representing Chile in this interview. And the idea of this project is to bring different professionals who are experts, who have experience working internationally in different markets around the world, and to talk about the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in their countries. So today we have Beatriz, and we will have 7 questions that I've asked all the other interviewees. We will start now. Beatriz, thank you so much again for being here. Tell us a little bit more about you and what kind of work that you do, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate your time, Rafa. Well, what do I do? Well, I work in a Japanese trading company for already 10 years. I'm based in Santiago de Chile. And well, I'm currently in the position of deputy manager of the food, forestry, and chemicals department. It's like a very diverse business, but challenging and fun at the same time. So very happy to be working with Japanese people.
That's great. Thank you. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you in this interview. You have this immense international experience with a culture that's different from yours, right? So it's very interesting that you have this. You understand perhaps with the foreigner how he works with the Chileno counterpart. So that's interesting. Thanks for the insights. Going to the second question, at least, what are some things you recommend people to do or say when they first meet or speak with a potential partner in Chile and that they want to do a new project or start a business opportunity? What should they first do or say? And also, what should they avoid doing and saying that first encounter, right?
Mm, yeah, good question. I mean, in general, Chilean business culture values relationship building, and also it's very important, to give a good impression, especially on the first meeting, right? So, what to do or say? I would say maybe start with polite formalities, greet with a firm handshake, direct, eye contact, and a friendly tone, of course, or use formalities, like señor, señora, Mr., Mrs., along the person's, last name. Also, maybe be clear and professional about the proposal. Present your ideas in a structured, logical, and prepared manner. Show that you've done your homework about their company, industry, or local conditions in Chile. And then I would say maybe follow up with courtesy, like if possible, send a thank you message or follow up email summarizing, the discussion, next steps, and express appreciation for their time. I mean, that's something that shows, both interest in the business and building a relationship. So I would say maybe that's what you should definitely do, especially in a first meeting. And then on the other hand, what to avoid or maybe not do or say. Don't jump straight into business. I mean, if you go directly, into numbers or contract conditions without any like previous like small talk, like a personal approach to the other person, it might be considered, as cold and sometimes even disrespectful. So maybe you shouldn't do it. I mean, it's not an obligation, to have a small talk, of course. But if you skip this part, maybe it can be harder, to build trust. Then I think maybe don't assume informality or maybe over familiarity, like not using first names too soon or dress too casually or even making jokes, I mean, that can break the professional tone a little bit. So maybe try to avoid that. And well, for me, I think the most important one would be don't overpromise or exaggerate. I mean, in Chile, business people really appreciate honesty and realism. So don't promise things that you can basically not make, right? For example, I'm in the food industry and someone says, yeah, I can offer 3,000 metric tons of salmon like for tomorrow. But you realize that your factory can only process, I don't know, 50 metric tons of salmon. So basically, I mean, in the end, that will eventually, damage the or even break, the long-term relationship that you're trying to develop with this company. So, as an example, my personal experience, well, we started a business maybe 7 years ago, by exporting frozen chestnuts to Japan. At that time, 7, 8 years ago, there was only one company who could actually freeze chestnuts, right? So, okay, we managed, to close a contract with a Chilean supplier. Of course, I will not disclose the name of this company because maybe I can get a fine or something. They were like, how many containers do you need? And my Japanese customer, they were like, oh, we need maybe 2 containers should be fair enough. And then this, general manager at that time, he was like, we can offer 4 containers if you want. And then it was like, no, only 2 containers. It's okay. And then we closed the deal, we signed the contract. And then at the moment of shipping out, these containers, it turned out that they called me, over the phone and was like, Beatriz, I'm so sorry, but we don't have any raw material to process your containers. And I was like, but this container should be shipped out maybe tomorrow. And they were like, yeah, but I think it's going to be only half of a container. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a very, very big problem for my Japanese customer, of course. So I had, to let them know, we're having some issues, about this container. So most likely it's going to be half of the container. Okay, they were like, but how come this happened? We signed the contract. This is not a way of doing businesses. And basically, we sent this half of the container, and then we just cut ties, with this Chilean supplier, and we never did any business with them again. They overpromised, they exaggerated what they could offer, and in the end, they could not offer anything. So actually, this guy called me maybe 2 months ago, like, hey, Beatriz, long time no hear from you. How about if we start, a business to Japan? And I was like, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your call, but I'm not sure it's going to be a possibility anymore after, what happened, especially, in the Japanese culture. They're like very like square people. So it's like, if you like damage the trust, in the first place, then you're done. There's nothing you can do in order to like repair, all the damage. So yeah, I'd say maybe those 3 points would be like what not to say or do.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bia, and grateful. Thanks for sharing your personal experience. I think the key word you said a couple of times is trust, and not only the Japanese, but I think even internally, because Chile, as a Latin American country, and many other countries, obviously, the relationship is very important, and the trust is very important. But one interesting thing that you mentioned, and from my own experience in Latin America and in my other interviews with Latin American countries, is we find the other Latin American countries spend more time in the small talk. They have this more impersonal relationship building that can go on for many hours or days. But I feel like how you share this, in my own experience in Chile, it's a little bit more structured. It's less time of and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the small talk is important, but it's also more structured and it's not as long as perhaps other Latin American countries. But it's still very important. This personal, not jumping into business, getting to know the other person. So what you said is very, very clear. So I hope everyone's taking notes. Thank you, Bia. Mm-hmm. Coming to the third question, we recognize that it's important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business there. What cultural aspects might be considered when doing business in Chile?
Yeah, you're right. Cultural understanding is essential when doing businesses, in a country. And even though, Chile is one of the most economically stable and business-friendly countries in Latin America, it still has its own, distinct cultural values that shape, how people approach work, relationships, and also decision making. So when it comes to cultural aspects, to be considered, I'd say maybe well, importance of personal relationships, as we were discussing. Trust is built gradually and often through like personal interaction. I mean, that is why I think it's very important, to invest time in face-to-face meetings, lunches, dinners, or even casual conversations, so that it can help, build a strong business foundation. Then, well, formality and respect, because Chilean business culture is more formal and conservative than others, especially in the initial stages of a relationship. So the use of formal greetings and titles, dressing professionally, and maybe addressing people respectfully, with a like a respectful language, can be considered, I think, as an important point. And also punctuality. I mean, punctuality is highly appreciated, especially in the business settings. You don't want to keep your potential customer or supplier or partner waiting for more than, I don't know, 20 minutes on your first meeting. And then I would say maybe communication style, because, Chilean business people tend to be polite, indirect, and very diplomatic in terms of communication. Basically, we will not say like no, like directly. Instead, you'll hear phrases maybe like, okay, we'll see, or it's complicated. It's very important, I think, to read between the lines and listen carefully, to the tone and context. So, yeah, I think that those 3 points might be important, maybe to be considered.
Fantastic. Yeah, very, very good tips. Very good tips. Thanks, Bia. To the fourth question, if someone does not speak Spanish, what do you suggest a foreigner to do to be able to do business, to be able to communicate with their partners, their clients in Chile? How can they do business if they don't speak Spanish? Is that a big problem in Chile?
Yeah, actually, that's a common concern, for many people when doing businesses in Chile. Even though Spanish, is the official and dominant language, and also English proficiency, is growing. I think relying only on English can still create, like some communication gaps, especially in more like traditional and regional settings. So I'd suggest, well, first of all, hire a professional interpreter or translator who's, specialist in the industry or area of businesses that you're going to have a meeting, as there are doctors, specialists in, I don't know, like cardiologists or gynecologists or ophthalmologists. There are translators and interpreters. There are specialists, I don't know, in mining, in medicine. So I think maybe hire like a specialist, like translator and interpreter. It would be great. For example, if you're attending important meetings or reviewing contracts, having an interpreter in this case can prevent misunderstandings and also speed up the process. You can also discuss in advance, and ask for bilingual materials, or you can also offer your company information and documents in both, English and Spanish. And also, I would say that if the interpreter can be maybe Chilean, that's also very, very helpful, because he or she can be, like more immersed, into the Chilean culture, and maybe can have like a better understanding also, in the environment at that time. So I think that's something that I'd suggest. And secondly, maybe learn like key Spanish phrases and business terms. A little effort can make your Chilean counterparts or colleagues like more open and willing to help bridge, the language gap. Even though if you're not fluent, learning basic, phrases, shows respect and interest. So, for example, for greetings, you can start by buenos días, mucho gusto, ¿cómo está usted? Which means good morning, nice to meet you, how are you? This would be, mind blowing for your Chilean counterparts if you're, I don't know, from Japan or Egypt or other countries. And I think it can also work as a very good icebreaker. Or, for example, business phrases like "podemos revisar el contrato," which is like, "Can we go through the contract?" Or "Estoy interesado en su propuesta," like, "I'm interested in your proposal." I mean, words or phrases can really make a big difference in that sense. And then I would say maybe focus on non-verbal communication and listening. I mean, in early meetings, for example, active listening, body language, and tone matter just as much as words, right? So you can show engagement, for example, by nodding, keeping, the eye contact, and why not smiling? So the other person or your counterpart will always feel, that you're very interested, about the meeting, even though you don't understand, the language itself. So I think those 3 points might be very useful.
Yeah, great. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I want to highlight one of the things you said about when you hire a local interpreter. We know there's a lot of maybe other Spanish speaking nationals that live in Chile, perhaps, but having a Chilean interpreter, he'll understand the slangs, he'll understand the cultural aspects of communication. So that's a really good tip if they can
Yeah.
find a local Chilean interpreter, right? That's good. Thank you. The first question is more related to communication. To get better results in visibility and sales, what are your recommendations on the most effective ways to do marketing for products or services in Chile? And in terms of the channels, people use social media. How do people communicate? How does a foreign company communicate their products and services in Chile? How could they?
Mm. Yeah, great question. And I think it's a very important one too. To improve visibility and sales in Chile, I mean, first of all, marketing must be localized, trust driven, and also responsive, to Chilean consumer behaviors and business norms. For example, digital marketing. I think this is like a key point. Chile has a high internet and smartphone penetration, as well as very active, like social media users. So digital channels in general, they work very well, especially after pandemic. I think it's important to invest in like digital channels and social media, Google Ads, WhatsApp Business, or something trendier, like Instagram or TikTok, influencers, brand ambassadors. That's very trendy these days. Or also using, like local e-commerce and retail channels, like Mercado Libre, which is like Latin America's Amazon, and maybe offer, localized shipping and payment options. Or maybe use relationship marketing, try to participate in local trade shows, industry events, or chamber of commerce activities. That would really open some doors, for networking and many business opportunities as well. I mean, it's something very interesting that, of course, we could be discussing about this like the whole day. But I think that's probably the best way to maybe summarize it. And then, well, I think maybe emphasize quality, sustainability, and also transparency. I mean, Chilean consumers are, increasingly focused on value, ethics, and also sustainability, especially in sectors like mine, like mine sectors like seafood or agriculture. So showing like traceability, fair practices, and environmental responsibility, which is also something very trendy these days. I think is a plus, to get better results.
Yeah, thanks, Bia. Just to add on that, can you briefly explain which are the most popular, let's say, social media platforms that people can do business or people do business with? What do people usually use, the consumers, to buy stuff, perhaps, or see promotions?
Yeah, I would say maybe every store, I don't know, maybe supermarket, for example. I mean, these days, almost every company would have like their online platforms, for selling their products. I think the most popular one, which basically you can find anything from any company, would be Mercado Libre. And nowadays, they've been like very competitive because, maybe years ago, if you buy something online, it would be like, okay, then you will receive it, I don't know, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. But now the added value, that Mercado Libre has is that if you buy, I don't know, a phone or food or a perfume, for example, it will be at home maybe on the same day or on that same morning. So they've been like very competitive, but at the same time, they've been investing, in advertising. There are like I don't know, Google ads. I mean, they're everywhere. So I think that would be like the most popular platform. But I think to do businesses, I'm not quite sure because even though I'm not that old, I still use. I mean, like I don't use any business platform, to do business. I will do it like the old way, like maybe look up for companies. I don't know if I have an inquiry from Japan to export, I don't know, blueberries. I would just look up for, I don't know, maybe some export statistics, like the main players, and maybe look up, in the internet, like, okay, this company can offer blueberries, and then I will get in touch, but maybe with the contact information in the website. I also understand that LinkedIn, it's a very nice platform. I'm not sure if for doing businesses itself, but for networking. So basically, you can look up for different companies or people in charge from different businesses, and then you can get in touch. And then, of course, you can, I don't know, have meetings and then maybe start a potential business. But if you're asking like for business specifically, yeah, I'd say maybe LinkedIn. It is still like a very very good platform for well, getting to know people, from other countries. I mean, I've been getting like a lot of invites from people from, I don't know, China, Vietnam, because my company. I'm not sure if I can disclose my company name. Of course, you'll put the information afterwards. So it's well, Itochu Corporation is a very important Japanese trading company. It's one of the top players in Japan. Always competing with Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo, Marubeni, and then Itochu. Itochu is very very popular there. And
Great. Thanks, you. Very, very helpful tips. LinkedIn is also a platform to build trust and relationship with different people. So it's good to know Mercado Libre as well is a very good suggestion for companies from abroad coming to Chile to know that this platform is a good channel as well to get their products out. Going to the sixth question, if a local business partner in Chile wants to get to know you better, invites you to a local coffee, tea place, a restaurant, even a virtual happy hour, what are the kind of topics that people in Chile like to talk about that's not business related? What will you be talking about with a local Chileno?
Good question. Yeah, well, I think building good personal connections really makes a difference, right? Especially in places like Chile, where relationships matter, a lot. So I would say maybe talk about family and personal life. We often like to talk about our family, children, siblings, in my case, pets, uh, how we spend the weekend with our families, with our relatives, and maybe also sharing a little bit of your family or your background can also help, to build trust in a more like a informal way, right? And sorry, this is actually my favorite, food and wine. I mean, we are very proud, of our local cuisine, but I think we're even prouder of our Chilean wine, right? I mean, the best wine in the world, let's say it. So sorry for all the other countries, but Chilean wine is the best. So it's always great to talk about those kinds of topics. I mean, personally, I'm a wine lover, of course. So I would spend hours talking about wine because I know a little bit also about wines. I think I'm like a sommelier or something. So I would spend hours, talking and drinking, of course, like a lot of Chilean wine, of course. And then I would say maybe travel in places because Chile is a very long, narrow country, and we basically have all the seasons at once. Sounds crazy, right? I mean, first you have Atacama Desert in the north part of Chile. You have Patagonia in the south. Then there's an incredible, coastline with beautiful beaches and fresh seafood, in the west, and then mountains. in the east, to go on skiing. So there's a lot of interesting things, to talk and share. And I think that's something very fun. And at the same time, you can exchange, like places, with, I don't know, if you're from Brazil, for example, you would say, oh, then in Brazil, we also have, like beautiful beaches, Copacabana and others, Búzios or Florianopolis, many different places. So I think that can turn out to be like a very good, like informal conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, I've been to Santiago, Valparaiso, and Villa del Mar, but I want to
Uh,
get to know this. You mentioned so many other beautiful places to visit. It's my to-do list. I want to go to. It's such a long country, right? The stretch, so it's very different sceneries to see. So, and the
mm,
wine I've tasted, I've visited as well, so I know it's fantastic. So
it is.
everybody who goes down there has to try the wine and visit the country. Those two things I recommend as well. Thank you. Moving to the last question. What is one word or a phrase in Spanish in the Chilean context that somebody should learn how to say and why?
Yeah, I love that question. Actually, I mean, it's simple but powerful, But if I had to pick one word, even though it's like a very typical word, I would say gracias, which is thank you, of course. Why? Because it shows respect and appreciation. It also builds goodwill and trust, which is key, in the Chilean culture. Also, it is very easy and versatile. I mean, you can use it in any situation, after meetings, when receiving help, or even in a just in a like casual conversation. And it also opens, doors, because being polite and thankful makes people, more willing to engage and support you. So it's a pretty easy word and very popular, because most of Spanish speaking countries will use it. But I think it goes beyond the word. I mean, it's like what the word, like represents and stands for. So I think, yeah, gracias. So gracias. Muchas gracias.
Sí, gracias, gracias, Beatriz. No, I think what you said was interesting. It's not just I mean, a lot of people have said this, gracias, thank you, but I think you explained it very well, the respect it has and deeper meaning behind it. So thanks for that. Unfortunately, we have to end, but we want to thank you. Muchas gracias, Beatriz, for being part of this project. Thanks for sharing your insights, recommendations, valuable experience. I hope this interview also benefits you. And we will be writing a summary in the newsletter, and we'll share your LinkedIn. Anybody has questions and so forth. We hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. Any last comments, Beatriz, for everybody watching?
No, just say thanks. I mean, it was very, very fun. I had to admit that I was a little bit nervous, because sometimes it gets me like very nervous, to speak in front of a camera. Well, in this case, my laptop, but I don't know. But it's something that I need to work on, to start losing, all these like fears about speaking in public. But at the same time, well, I felt very comfy in this interview. And also, I think there were like different topics, but I think very important ones, especially when it comes to culture, because, people would say, but doing business or businesses is like something universal. But no, because you need to know where you're doing business, who you're doing businesses with, and that's something that can change, from one culture to another. I mean, in my case, working with Japanese people to a Japanese culture is totally different from Chilean culture. So of course I've been here like for 10 years. I mean, working for this company, but still, the communication, I mean, the cultural difference is pretty much shocking. I mean, they're totally different from us, and their way of doing things and businesses as well. So I think it's very important for everyone, not only because you you specifically have the business with that culture. But I think like a general culture, it is something that everyone should know. I mean, how to do businesses, or not even doing businesses, but like know about the different cultures, or that there can actually be different cultures. We don't supposed to be, we're not supposed to be, like the same, right? So yeah, no, I think well, I think it was very short interview, because I think we can keep on discussing about this, like maybe for the whole day, maybe with a bottle of wine afterwards. uh, but I really appreciate your work, that you've been doing also with other participants, and thank you so much for sharing, also to your network, because I think it's a very good initiative, because it's open for everyone, that maybe can maybe that want to maybe learn a little bit more about the different cultures. So no, I really appreciate the invitation, and also the the instance, and the initiative. So if anyone wants to reach me out, then please share my LinkedIn uh, site, and then of course I'll get in touch with everyone. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
No, gracias, Beatriz. You did a fantastic job. You're a natural communicator, so thank you for that. And absolutely, very important tips, insights you gave. And even in terms of in Latin America itself, Chile has a little bit of a different business culture, so it's really important to understand what you presented here. Next time you'll be over wine for sure, Chilean wine, obviously. So
Please.
thank you so much, and have a great day. Thanks so much again, Beatriz. Ciao.
Thank you so much. You too. Ciao, ciao.